EP for the North West, Sajjad Karim. Hello to you. What is your reaction to Dominic Grieve's comments?
Well, I do find, certainly as a member of the British Pakistani community myself, I found these comments to be offensive, divisive. I do think they were ill-advised, and I'm afraid the very general way in which Dominic has tried to make the points that he is making will have the net effect of being seen as purely populist in nature.
Are his comments inaccurate?
They are not based upon fact at all, and that's one of the first things that I did. I considered in as much detail as I possibly could the Telegraph interview and report that Dominic provided, and it's quite clear when one carries out even the most basic of examination of the claims that he is making that the facts do not support the arguments that he is presenting. And I think it's absolutely essential that if any politician in an influential position, regardless of whatever personal political ambitions that individual may have, that it is essential that they do not try and behave in a way that creates a general impression about any particular community. Now, if Dominic has got any individual specific points he wants to make in relation to voter fraud or anything of that nature, that's quite a separate issue and can be looked at. But to try and generalise in this way and to paint all British Pakistani community members in a certain light, I'm afraid that is simply something that cannot be ignored, and it is certainly not something that the British public at large will accept from Dominic at all.
Well, he's far from on his own in terms of that generalisation. I mean, the Electoral Commission has looked at this precisely because of the anecdotal evidence which has gone on for years, and they're less clear on the facts than you are, because they came back with their last report in May saying, well, we can't conclude, we'll look at it further.
Well, I can actually speak to you as somebody who has been directly involved in leading campaigns against electoral fraud going back many, many, many years. And I recall very clearly that it was, in fact, the government of the day, a Labour government, that brought in place very lax rules as to postal votes. And I myself had to deal with several election campaigns where there was quite clearly electoral fraud that was taking place. A number of areas where electoral fraud was taking place involved people from the South East and South Asian background communities, but there was also many examples of voter fraud taking place in lots of other communities as well. However, I make the point again, if there is a specific issue in relation to voter fraud that wants to be looked at, that is something that can be examined in detail, but the facts don't stack up. No, if I can just deal with the wider points, however, that Dominic has made.
Disproportionate representation?
When it comes to the voter fraud issue, that is something that needs very careful examination. And I can tell you, from the areas that I've been involved in, there are many people from within the South Asian communities who have been victims of voter fraud. So they have been at the forefront of leading campaigns against voter fraud, and I've certainly been one of those individuals. The wider point that Dominic is making, Dominic is trying to make, however, is completely unfounded and not based on fact. To try and put forward an assumption that people of British Pakistani origin and background are in some way more corrupt than people of the general British population, I'm afraid has no factual standing whatsoever.
Well, this is the difficulty, isn't it, that no factual standing, because we are at this stage left, in a sense, with anecdotal evidence, some convictions, and that is why the Electoral Commission is still trying to come to a conclusion on this subject. So why is it that a prominent politician can find himself, based upon that sort of lack of concrete evidence, in a position to make such a statement? Well, you're doing the same, but the opposite side of the argument. You're saying there's no problem.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm saying there are two separate issues here. If you want to concentrate on the issue of allegations of vote fraud, then that is quite a separate thing. To make a very general assumption in relation to one community is quite a separate thing, and that is something that has been done here, and that's the distinction that I'm trying to draw here on your programme now.
OK, well, Sajjad Karim, thank you very much.